Kaelithra stood at the centre of the courtyard, shadowy tendrils swirling around her, declaring herself the Queen of Nythoria. The courtyard was still, bathed in a glowing aftermath of the explosion, her powers fully unleashed. Zariel knelt, swearing his loyalty once again to her, and those who had gathered looked on, frozen in awe and uncertainty. As the last tremor of magic settled, a portal opened with a bright crackle behind her. Gunnar, Derren and Alpha stepped out, their exhaustion from the recent battle visible, but the sight that greeted them was entirely unexpected. Derren blinked, taking in the aftermath of the destruction, before muttering, "What the hell happened here? Is this how you welcome us back?" Gunnar, ever the seasoned warrior, assessed the situation quickly. His eyes landed on Karina, or at least the woman he knew as Karina, and immediately sensed the monumental shift in her power. "Karina?" he asked, cautiously stepping forward. This was no longer just the assassin he once knew. She turned to them, her darkened gaze smouldering with fury, her voice no longer familiar but something more regal, cold, and controlled. "He will pay," she seethed, her voice dripping with venom. "The trader will pay with his life." Derren, sensing this wasn't the right time for sarcasm, stayed silent as Gunnar stepped closer. The shadows curling around Karina flickered as if sensing her turmoil. Gunnar, always quick to grasp what needed to be said, locked his eyes on her. "You need to slow down," he said calmly. "If the trader's hiding under the protection of the Shadow Realm bar's truce, there's a lot more at stake than just him." Karina's fury flared, but Gunnar's steady voice kept her grounded. The darkness surrounding her subsided slightly, but the tension didn't leave her face. "You don't know what he's done," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her rage and sorrow. "He destroyed my world. He sold me to the Demon King." Gunnar's eyes narrowed in disbelief. This was far beyond anything he'd expected. But for now, the urgency of the moment demanded patience. "We'll bring him to justice," he promised, but his voice carried a warning. "But we do this right." For the first time since they'd returned, Derren felt the weight of what was coming. Gunnar's calm resolve, Karina's burning need for revenge. Something was coming, and it was far bigger than any of them had anticipated. Gunnar extended his hand toward Karina, his expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "It appears we have a lot to talk about," he said, his voice calm, though his mind was already working to piece together what little he understood of the situation. Karina hesitated for a moment, the dark tendrils still twisting around her as if they were a part of her now. Slowly, she grasped his hand. The moment her fingers touched his, the shadows retreated slightly, as though his presence alone could temper the storm inside her. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice low but filled with anger that simmered just beneath the surface. She pulled her hand back and crossed her arms, as though trying to hold herself together. Gunnar gave her a small nod, watching her closely. "Start at the beginning. What happened while we were away?" Karina let out a slow breath, her eyes dark with memories that were still raw and freshly returned to her mind. She began to speak, her voice steady but tinged with the weight of everything that had happened. "It was all lies," she started, her tone bitter. "The trader? Everything about him was a lie. He wasn't just some rogue, some neutral force lurking in the shadows. He was responsible for everything. The darkness that destroyed Nythoria. He released it. He handed me over to the Demon King." Gunnar's brow furrowed, his eyes narrowing as he processed the revelation. "The Demon King?" Karina nodded. "Ultranacious Eternus. He was the one who controlled me for so long, and it was the trader who gave me to him. I saw it, everything, like the memories were being unraveled inside me all at once. He betrayed my world, my family, and me." Derren, standing off to the side with his arms crossed, gave a low whistle. "Well, that explains a lot." Ignoring Derren's remark, Gunnar's jaw tightened. "And now you're going after him." Karina's eyes flashed, the tendrils of shadow swirling faster around her again. I'm going to destroy him, Gunner. I want to make him pay for every lie, every betrayal. I want him to answer for what he did to me, to my world. Gunner took a deep breath, considering her words carefully. You're not wrong to want justice, but we need to be smart about this. Charging into the Shadow Realm bar, breaking the truce, that won't help us, and it won't get you what you want. I'm not waiting, she said, her voice taut with frustration. He can't hide from me. Not now. Gunner stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me. We'll get him, but we have to do it the right way. I know the power you feel right now, but you can't let it blind you to the consequences. You know what happens if you break the truce. We're not just dealing with the trader here. The moment you break that rule, you'll have the entire Shadow Realm bar and every powerful creature within it turning on you. Derren, still lingering behind them, piped up. And trust me, you don't want to piss off that many supernatural creatures in one go. That place is a nightmare buffet of power. Karina's hands clenched into fists, her entire being radiating frustration and power that seemed barely contained. But Gunner's words slowly broke through the storm inside her. The shadows receded further, and her shoulders dropped slightly. You're right, she finally muttered, though it seemed to pain her to admit it. We need a plan. Gunner gave a small nod, relaxing slightly. We'll bring him to justice. You have my word, but we're not going to throw ourselves into a trap. He's slippery, and we need to be a step ahead. Her gaze softened, though the fury in her eyes still simmered. Thank you, Gunner. I just need him to pay. For all of it. Gunner looked at her, a rare softness in his eyes. He will. But we're going to make sure you stay in control while we do it. Derren, ever the voice of tension-breaking sarcasm, raised an eyebrow. Right. So, anyone else feel like we missed out on all the fun while we were away? Explosions, ascensions, shadowy tendrils. What's next? Do we have to fight a giant dragon or something? Karina shot him a look, but her lips twitched slightly, almost as if she were amused. No dragons, she said, but we have a traitor to catch. Gunner turned to Derren. We have our work cut out for us, but first we need to regroup. There's still a lot we don't know. Derren shrugged, glancing between the two of them. I'm in. But seriously, can someone fill me in on what exactly happened here? I feel like I walked into the aftermath of a fireworks show. Karina sighed, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. You'll get your answers soon enough. But first, we're going after the trader. Gunner placed a hand on Karina's shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You're not doing this alone, Karina, not anymore. She met his eyes, a flicker of gratitude passing through her. No, not alone. For the first time since her ascension, she allowed herself to believe that with Gunner, Derren, and the pack behind her, she had a chance, not just at vengeance, but at reclaiming the future that was stolen from her. As the courtyard began to quiet, the night settled in, and they began their next steps toward unraveling the truth and preparing for the confrontation that would define Kaelithra's future, and the fate of the trader. The weight of the revelation hung in the room like an unspoken tension, an unshakable burden pressing down on Karina's shoulders. She paced the courtyard, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sorrow, and a cold, steely resolve that frightened her even more. Shadows curled around her feet, twisting and writhing, responding to the power she barely understood. She could feel her fingers itching to grip her katana and storm out in search of the trader, vengeance hot in her veins. But before she could make a decision, Gunner and Derren entered the courtyard, their expressions caught somewhere between sympathy and determination. Gunner stepped forward first, his gaze steady as he watched her. He reached out, his left hand, a fusion of man and machine, resting gently on her shoulder. She glanced down at it, seeing the intricately engraved runes Eli and Eliana had added. A reminder of his battle scars, and a testament to a long-fought war against darkness. Karina, he began, his voice calm but filled with the weight of experience. I know what it's like to want revenge. The kind that eats you up from the inside, that keeps you awake at night, planning every last detail of what you'll do when you get your hands on the person responsible. He held her gaze, and for the first time, she could see the depth of his past pain mirrored in his remaining blue eye. She opened her mouth to respond, but he raised his hand slightly, signaling her to listen. That drive, that need for vengeance, it cost me. I don't just mean the arm or the eye, he said, his voice lowering. It cost me people I cared about. People I couldn't protect because I let that anger cloud my judgment. When I took on Ultranacious, I thought I was unstoppable. I thought my anger would fuel me through any battle. He paused, letting the words sink in. Derren, leaning against the stone wall, broke in, his voice softer than usual. Yeah, and now he's got the hardware to prove it. But honestly, Karina, he's not just talking about a broken arm and eye here. He's talking about the pieces of himself that he lost because of that vengeance, the pieces he might never get back. Karina looked between the two of them, her grip loosening slightly on her katana as their words penetrated the fog of her anger. You're saying I should just walk away? Her tone was tinged with frustration, but her voice wavered as though the fierce determination was beginning to splinter. Gunnar shook his head slowly. No, I'm saying vengeance has a price. If you're going to go after him, if you're going to reclaim your realm and honor the lives that were lost, then do it with a plan, with focus. I can't tell you not to want retribution, but I can tell you this. Don't let it consume you. Derren stepped forward, placing a hand on her other shoulder, his tone unexpectedly gentle. Look, Karina. Or should I say Princess Kaelithra? He smirked, softening the tension with his usual sarcasm. You're not alone in this. You have all of us. Gunnar's right. If this is something you have to do, fine. But let us do it with you. Don't go marching in there solo like a one-woman army, or you're bound to end up right where he wants you. Karina closed her eyes, the faces of her parents, her people, her entire realm flashing through her mind. The anger was still there, a simmering ember, but the intensity of it had dimmed. She released a long, shaky breath, her hands unclenching. You're both right, she said quietly. I need to think this through. She looked up, meeting Gunnar's gaze. Teach me what you know. Help me be ready. Gunnar's expression softened and he gave a slight nod. That's what we're here for. This is bigger than revenge, Karina. This is about reclaiming what's rightfully yours. Derren gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. And hey, I'll even tone down the sarcasm. Maybe. She couldn't help the faint smile that crossed her lips. I'm holding you to that, Derren. He grinned, stepping back with a casual salute. You've got my word. Now, what's step one, fearless leader? He directed his question to Gunnar, ready to jump into action. First things first, Gunnar replied, his voice calm but resolute. We regroup. Plan. We're going to need Eli's mind and Eliana's insight. And when we're ready, then we make our move. He looked at Karina, his eye reflecting both pride and concern. This time, we do it together. With a final nod, Karina felt a flicker of hope, like the first break in a storm. She didn't have to face this alone. And as they turned to head back to the others, she knew she had a chance not just to avenge her past, but to reclaim her future. Kaelithra stood at the heart of the courtyard, the cool night air, heavy with expectation, and the glow of the full moon casting an ethereal light over the gathering. She could feel the weight of her new title, Queen of Nythoria, a reality that still felt foreign but resonated deep within her. No longer was she simply Karina, the lone survivor of a shattered realm. Now she was Kaelithra, the last of her line, destined to restore what had been lost. Around her the pack assembled in silence, each member solemn and attentive. The air buzzed with their quiet energy, their unspoken vows of loyalty to her and to each other. Ashley stood closest, her eyes sharp with both empathy and fierce determination, while Derren's expression softened as he caught Kaelithra's gaze, nodding with a reassuring smile. Their presence fortified her, but her mind was already turning to another task at hand. She turned, her gaze finding Kaelin at the edge of the courtyard. He lingered there, half in shadow, as though the light wasn't his to claim. Kaelithra moved toward him, her steps steady and purposeful. The pack parted, giving her the space she needed, and all eyes followed her as she approached him. "Kaelin," she said, her voice soft, yet carrying the weight of her new role. "There's something I need from you." He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers with a familiar intensity. "Anything, Your Majesty." The title echoed between them, feeling strange yet deeply right. "Your armor and weapons," she continued, her tone unwavering. "It's time you retrieved them." His face tightened, and for a moment he looked away, shadows darkening his features. "I abandoned them," he admitted, the weight of his past evident in his voice. "I believed myself unworthy of wielding them after I failed you." She regarded him steadily, feeling the sorrow in his words. "Kaelin," she said, her voice softening, "the past is unchangeable, but we shape the future. You are my guardian, as you were meant to be, and those weapons were forged to defend Nythoria's rightful queen. Let them serve their purpose again." Kaelin's jaw clenched, but a new resolve began to shine in his eyes. He took a deep breath, nodding. "As you wish, my queen. I will retrieve them." He looked toward the workshop, then back at her. "And I will take them to Eli if you believe she can ready them." A small, determined smile played on Kaelithra's lips. "Eli's work will ensure you are equipped to face whatever awaits us." A chorus of supportive murmurs came from the pack as Kaelin turned, setting off with purpose. Eli, who had been observing quietly, nodded to Kaelithra with a look that said she would take care of everything. Once Kaelin departed, Kaelithra turned back to face the pack. There was an unspoken unity in their expressions, a shared bond of purpose and commitment. Ashley stepped forward, meeting Kaelithra's gaze, her lips curving in a faint but determined smile. "You've got us, Kaelithra. We're here for you, through it all." Derren, his usual sarcasm softened by sincerity, gave her a nod. "Guess you're not getting rid of us anytime soon, Your Highness." A ripple of laughter followed his words, breaking some of the tension. The others echoed their commitment in their own ways, small gestures, words of encouragement, or simply a touch to her shoulder, each offering their strength to hers. Kaelithra closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of their support wash over her. She knew now more than ever that she wasn't alone. Whatever trials lay ahead, she would face them with the unwavering loyalty of those by her side. And as they stood under the watchful gaze of the moon, it was clear to everyone present that Kaelithra's journey to reclaim Nythoria was only just beginning. As the group gathered in the courtyard, the moonlight cast an eerie glow over the debris left by Kaelithra's ascension. Scorched stones and shattered remnants from Eli's security sensors littered the ground, testament to the sheer force that had torn through the courtyard just hours before. Gunnar took in the scene with a grim expression, his eye moving over the destruction, his mind already working through the next steps. Eli knelt beside the remains of one of her sensors, carefully lifting a few charred fragments and frowning. "Well," she said thoughtfully, holding up a twisted piece of metal that sparked faintly. "At least we have data. Readings from these could help me build something more robust, even against shadow walking." Gunnar nodded approvingly. "Good. Let's see that we're ready if it happens again," he replied, crossing his arms. Despite his approval, his stance remained tense, as if still braced for any lingering threat. Derren looked over at the torn courtyard with an exhausted sigh. Look, I think we can all agree it's been one hell of a day. Why don't we pick up the pieces, literally and metaphorically, in the morning? He suggested, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe we could pretend the courtyard wasn't hit by a magical tornado overnight. The faintest of smiles passed over Eli's face, and even Kaelithra, still processing her recent ascension, allowed herself a brief nod of agreement. As the group murmured their assent, Gunnar straightened, his face shifting to a look of seriousness. I want everyone in for a meeting first thing tomorrow. We'll assess what we've got, make a plan, and patch up whatever we need to. Get some rest, people. We're only beginning to understand what's ahead. With that, the pack members began to disperse, each casting one last look over the courtyard before heading to their quarters, the weight of the day's events settling heavily on their shoulders. Kaelithra lingered a moment longer, looking around the courtyard, her courtyard now, with a sense of both pride and trepidation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would face them with her pack by her side.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.